Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to this service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Grand Traverse. I'm Pam Hendrick. I'm a member of Sunday Services Committee. And I want to welcome all of you who are joining us via live stream and those of you who are here with us this morning in our lovely sanctuary. And just a gentle reminder to those who are here with us to silence your electronic devices. Thank you. I always see a few people doing that, and I know I'm one of those people that needs to be reminded. So, whether you come here to seek the comfort of community with those who share your values, or to be challenged to examine your life in new ways, whether you are questioning or affirming your faith, we embrace you in all the complexity of your humanity. No matter the level of your income or education, no matter your gender, sexual orientation, or ethnicity, you are welcome to bring your whole self here. You are wholly loved. Do we have any visitors here today who'd like to introduce themselves? And are willing to stand and introduce yourselves? Welcome, Anastasia. Thank you. And we hope you'll stay afterwards for a conversation in our hospitality room. We'd love to get to know you. We welcome all into our church of wide embrace. Sharing our joys and concerns with our beloved community helps us stay connected in caring and in celebration. So you can write your message in the book there at your left. And if you have a concern that's too tender to share, you can reach out to a member of our caring community. Barb, would you stand up? Barb Gibson is a member of that caring community. So if you would like to speak with her after the service, please seek her out. And I'll remind you that you can also are encouraged to reach out to Reverend Alex once he returns from his time away later in August. If you do write something in the book, your joys and concerns will be read later in the service, so please write legibly. This is a time when many of us are feeling beaten up and beaten down by the chaos in the world and in our country. It is easy to sink into a sea of cynicism. And yet, here we are together in this beautiful place on this beautiful Sunday, looking for hope. Today, we're privileged to have guest minister Reverend Beth Marshall back with us again. Yes. Yeah, applause. That's right. She hasn't been here since before COVID, so she's going to help to guide us through these conflicting emotions as she speaks of living with a handmaid in the front lawn. And now, enjoy our prelude, Love Divine by John Zundel, performed by Julie Gaubetz.
Oh, it's good to be back. Our opening words this morning were written by Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf. This is a congregation that gathers in faith, not faith in one religion or one God or in any one way. We gather in faith of the power of diversity, the power of love, and the hope of a world transformed by our care. We gather in faith in ourselves and all those around us, not a faith that requires perfection or rightness in one another, rather a faith that in our shared imperfection we may learn to stumble and fall together. Faith that will help us rise to try again and again. Come, let us worship together.
As we enter into this time together, we acknowledge the land on which we live and gather was originally inhabited by indigenous peoples who lived for generations before centuries of violence and colonization. We honor and acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the original homeland of the Anishinaabeg, who are the Ojibwe and Odawa in our region. And we do this not to ease our consciences about the wrongs of the past, but to intentionally acknowledge the work that remains to be done. We raise the birch bark basket, holding the 4 sacred medicines of sweet grass, sage, cedar, and tobacco, to remind us to hold space for the Anishinaabeg as we work to reconcile the harm of colonization. We light our chalice this morning in communion with UU congregations throughout the world. These words are by Sarah Eileen Lawal. Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all that is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared community. Out of the flames, we rise. We now ring the singing bowl in the Buddhist tradition. Listen as the sound of the bell takes us to a place of deeper awareness. Renee will now lead us in our opening hymn, We Shall Overcome, number 169 in the gray hymnal. Please rise as you are willing and able.
Okay, that one got me. Our story this morning was written by poet laureate Amanda Gorman, illustrations by Lauren Long. She writes, I can hear change humming in its loudest, proudest song. I don't fear change coming, and so I sing along. I scream with the skies of red and blue streamers. I dream with the cries of tried and true dreamers. I'm a chant that rises and rings. There is hope where my change sings. Though some don't understand it, those windmills of mystery, I sing with the planet and its hills of histories. I hum with 100 hearts, each of us lifting a hand. I use my strength and my smarts. I take a knee to make a stand. I'm as bright as the light each day brings. There is love where my change sings. I show others tolerance, though it might take some courage. I don't make a taller fence, but fight to build a better bridge. I talk not only of distances, but where and how we came. I also walk our differences to show we are the same. I'm a movement that roars and springs. There's a wave where my change sings. Change sings where? There, inside me, because I'm the change I want to see. As I grow, it grows like seeds, for I am just what the world needs. I'm the voice where freedom rings, and you're the love your bright heart brings. We are the waves starting to spring. We are the change we sing. We're what the world is becoming, and we know it won't be long. We all hear the change strumming. Won't you sing along? The end.
We Unitarian Universalists are self-governing and self-sustaining. In keeping with our fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process, we get to vote on who our minister is and who our congregational leaders will be, and we are also solely responsible for the stewardship of our congregation. No parent organization sends us funds or clergy. Our existence and our presence as a force for good in our community rely on our covenant to contribute what we can of our resources and our talents. So as we pass the baskets here in the sanctuary, be aware that they have two sides, one side for sustaining our congregation and one for those in need in our greater community. And here are the other ways you can express your generosity. You can mail a check to the congregation. You can visit the UUCGT website, and you can use your phone by downloading the Vanco mobile app. And any of these methods give you the option of designating your gift for the congregation, for those in need, or for fulfilling your annual pledge. May our offering sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation. May we give in love and hope. And now it's time for meditation as we listen to Sicilian by Daniel Turk, performed by Julie Gaubitz. As I read the joys and concerns shared today by our community, Reverend Beth will light the candles. Our hearts go out to the families of Bob Dean and Dick Robb, who both passed away recently. We light candles in their memory, and there will be more details forthcoming. We also light a candle of concern and compassion for those in Kentucky who have lost lives and so much else in the recent catastrophic floods. And we light a final candle for those joys and concerns left unspoken but held in our hearts. And let us now enter into a time of silent reflection as we hold in our hearts all the joys and concerns of our beloved community. Our first reading today is by Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger, as many of you know, founded the first birth control clinic in the United States in 1916, when it was illegal to publish and distribute information on contraception. A lifelong advocate for birth control and women's rights, she founded the American Birth Control League in 1921, which later became Planned Parenthood Federation of America. She wrote this piece for the NPR series This I Believe in the 1950s. Remember, she wrote this in the 1950s. This I believe, first of all, that all of our basic convictions must be tested and transmuted in the crucible of experience. And sometimes, the more bitter the experience, the more valid the purified belief. There's an old Indian proverb which has inspired me in the world of my adult life. Build thou beyond thyself, but first be sure that thou thyself be strong and healthy in body and mind. I began to think of the world beyond myself when I first took an interest in nursing the sick. I knew something about the health and disease of bodies, but for a long time, I was baffled at the tremendous personal problems of life, of marriage, of living, of just being. Here indeed was a challenge to build beyond myself, but where was I to begin? I found the answer at every door. I began to believe that there was something I could do toward increasing an understanding of these basic human problems. To build beyond myself, I must first tap all inner resources of stamina, of courage, of resolution within myself. I was prepared to face opposition, even ridicule, denunciation, but I also had to prepare myself in defense of those unpopular beliefs. I had to prepare myself to face courts and even prisons, but I resolved to stand up, alone if necessary, against all the entrenched forces which opposed me. I started my battle some 40 years ago. The women and mothers whom I wanted to help also wanted to help me. They too wanted to build beyond the self in creating healthy children and bringing them up in a life to be happy and useful citizens. I believed it was my duty to place motherhood on a higher level than enslavement and accident. I was convinced we must care about people. We must reach out and help them in their despair. For these beliefs, I was denounced, arrested. I was in and out of police courts and higher courts, and indictments hung over my life for several years. But nothing could alter my beliefs because I saw these as truths and I stubbornly stuck to my convictions. No matter what it may cost in health and misunderstanding and sacrifice, something had to be done, and I felt that I was called by the force of circumstances to do it. Because of my philosophy and my work, my life has been enriched and full. My interests have expanded from local conditions and needs to a world horizon where peace on earth may be achieved when children are wanted before they are conceived. A new consciousness will take place. A new generation will be born to bring peace on earth. This belief has withstood the crucible of my life's joyous struggle. It remains my basic belief today. This I believe. At the end, as at the beginning of my long crusade for the future of the human race.
In 1973, I was 11 years old. Long ponytails and a very short skirt. My classmates and I were naive by modern standards. I remember the older girls running around our playground with surveys for the school paper on their clipboards. Were we for abortion or were we against it? Yes or no? In 5th grade, we didn't have the capacity for nuanced conversation. 44 years later, when I spoke at the Women's March in Erie, Pennsylvania, I had a better understanding at the nuances and complexities that I could not begin to articulate in 1973. That cold January day, I was not alone in my fears about what might be about to unleash, or in my deep discouragement about how our public discourse was crumbling. And yet I had hope. If the hand-printed signs and the large banners and all the pink hats and inspiring speeches were any indication, we would be a force to be reckoned with. We would not be ignored. We might be okay. After naming our collective uncertainty, our fears and anxieties, I told them that I believed there was hope. There was hope grounded in the knowledge that the thousands gathered that morning in Erie, the millions gathered around the world and gathered in spirit, were exactly the people we needed in the moment. I borrowed from the poet Alice Walker that we are the ones we have been waiting for. I believed that our combined efforts, if we could sustain them, would make a difference. A lot has happened in the 5.5 years since. Public discourse has further collapsed. Divisions between the left and right are deeper than ever, and the debate over Roe v. Wade has become a referendum on the role of women and rights in society. In May of this year, when the Supreme Court leak about Roe went public, it felt like the first of many of our hard-fought-for rights were at risk of falling like a string of dominoes. I had seen this movie, and I did not like how it ended. Poet Wilfred Owen once wrote that all a poet can do today is warn. Poets work magic with stanzas and couples, but my frustration and grief needed something tangible. So inspired by the imagery of Margaret Atwood's book, The Handmaid's Tale, and Hulu's series bearing the same name, I set out to make the most terrifying image I could imagine, a handmaid for my garden. I constructed her out of an old rebar scarecrow frame, a red graduation gown from Goodwill, and miscellaneous parts from the dollar store. I built her to protect my garden, my beans and my cucumbers, from the deer that like to wander through and help themselves. The handmaid decided she wanted to bear silent witness in the front yard. I can't argue with that. Now, at the time, I thought Atwood's handmaids, with their red dresses, their red capes, the white bonnet, and the white wings, were an iconic common protest symbol. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the handmaids, her red outfit defines her fertility. The wings of her bonnet that stretch out about this far are designed to reduce her ability to see the people on either side of her. Both are efforts to force childbearing women into submission. If you've seen women at rallies and protests dressed as handmaids, they are saying to those in power, no, we are not going to take this anymore. Once the handmaid took the position in our front yard, traffic slowed way down. This is not a bad thing. People stopped their cars, they got off their bicycle, they took pictures to send to their friends. A week later, after the brutal string of mass shootings in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas, Jake Tapper ended a segment on CNN with the words, "May their names be a blessing." And I knew what we needed to do. 21 backpacks, 10 brown paper grocery bags, 31 names. The word enough would hang on a board around the handmaid's neck. For several weeks, she stood silent witness to the gun violence that is punctuating our nation. Buffalo, Uvalde, Philadelphia, Stanwood, Anniston, Memphis, and so many more. Every week, I would go out and add more names to this long, growing list of cities. When the Supreme Court overturned Roe last month, many in my circles began to feel as though the bottom had fallen out, that we were falling into a century long past. I took down the backpacks and the shopping bags, and I replaced the word enough with Gilead. Gilead is the fictional nation state in Atwood's book where women are narrowly and primarily valued for their reproductive status, where gender-defined roles are tightly regulated and they have no choice. I've been surprised by the number of people who have thanked us for putting up this symbol that captures their frustration and their grief. We've even had people knock on the door and ask if they can take her picture. I should probably have set up a donation jar, put in $5 and I'll send it to Planned Parenthood. A handmaid in our front yard will not change policy on her own. That is up to us. And my hope is that she will give others the courage to speak out, inspire others to stand up and to do what needs to be done. Within hours of the Supreme Court's decision, women quietly started talking about stockpiling birth control pills and Plan B. Others posted about being companions if a woman suddenly wanted to go camping out of state. Couches and transportation were offered with no questions asked. More than a few men have wondered how quickly they ought to get vasectomies. Women are wondering about their digital footprints, and conversations around where to live and work, where to attend college, and even where to travel for work and vacation are taking on new meaning. Some people think these conversations are hysterical, and others see the truth beneath the anxiety. what if? What if? What stood out to me in all of these conversations was that no one was telling anyone else what they should or should not do. There was great thinking for individual process and decision-making. The Supreme Court's decision can be framed in terms of reproduction. However, it can also be framed as a referendum against one half of the nation's population, with no reference to the other half's responsibility or even role in the matter. It is a referendum that has nothing in place to deal with outcomes. The role of women and where that role intersects with reproduction is a topic that not everyone agrees on. And my hunch is even here this morning, there is a wide and varied range of opinion and belief, and that is a good thing. My other hunch is that there is far more in common than there is disagreement. If one theme has dominated my preaching for the last 2 decades, it is that we have far more in common than can ever divide us. So let's acknowledge the differences, but not let them divide us. The preacher in me will tell you that there is always hope. And I believe that in our networks, here and beyond these walls, are the people we need to do the work in the moment. That said, the old ways don't work the way they used to. There was a piece in the New York Times earlier this month by Zeynep Tufekci titled, "I was wrong about why protests work." Perhaps you saw it too. She wondered why the Civil Rights March and the Environmental March generated lasting, transformative change, and the large marches and rallies in the last decade or so have not. She describes the early marches in the 1960s and 70s as the culmination of years and months and weeks of hard work, building networks, sending letters, making phone calls, organizing individuals into groups, and coming up with a plan to implement. They were effectively sentences leading up to an exclamation point. The more recent marches, Black Lives Matter, Occupy, Arab Spring, and though she doesn't include the Women's March, I think it applies. They were driven in large part by social media. Millions and millions of people showed up and marched. They expressed their anger, their fear, and their grief. Each march and each rally became a release valve for our anxiety. But then what? The record-breaking crowds did not result in transformative change. The author equated these recent marches and rallies and protests to a sentence ending with a question mark. What happens next? We came together, we marched, we sang, we cried, we called out. But then what? The week after the Women's March in 2017, I remember having those what next conversations. No one really knew for sure. And then that momentum faded. The piece in the Times made sense to me. Many showed up, but what did we really have to do to get there? What did it cost us? What was the level of our personal investment? Many of us knitted pink hats, we made signs, we wrote speeches. But many of us hadn't committed weeks and months of unpaid work in drafty offices, calling representatives, knocking on doors, writing letters or securing funding, or coming up with a plan. We showed up, and that was good, but it wasn't enough. We didn't have to work as hard for it, and maybe that's where we fell short. We sprinted, but we should have been prepping for a marathon. I'm just old school enough to think that nothing good comes easily, and our most cherished dreams and goals demand our utmost commitment. But the preacher in me still believes there is hope, that there is still time, though the need is greater than ever. I still believe we are the ones we are waiting for, who can speak up when we hear words of hate and see acts of violence. We are the ones who can protect those who are vulnerable. We can create sanctuaries for the body and the spirit. We can get out and vote. We can remember that the conversation is far more complicated than it was in 1973. And we are the ones who need to do what needs to be done. So may it be.
This second reading is We All Need Mending by Susan Cook Ketteridge, who is senior minister at the old meeting house in East Montpelier Center, Vermont. And you may have heard of her father, Alistair Cook. She writes this: I can knit, but I cannot sew new creations from tissue paper patterns. Recently, though, I've come to relish the moments when I sit down and clumsily repair a torn shirt, hem a skirt, patch a pair of jeans, and I realize that I believe in mending. It is a time to stop, a time to quit running around. It is a chance to sew actual rips together. I can't solve the war in Iraq. I can't reverse global warming. I can't solve the problems of my community or the world, but I can mend things at hand. I can darn a pair of socks. Mending something is different than fixing it. Fixing it suggests that evidence of the problem will disappear. When we mend broken relationships, we realize that we're better together than apart, and perhaps even stronger for the rip and the repair. Mending doesn't say, this never happened. It says instead, something or someone was surely broken here, but it will rise to new life. So too, my old pajamas, the fence around the garden, the friendship torn apart by misunderstanding, a country being ripped apart by economic and social inequity, and a global divide of enormous proportions. They all need mending. I'm starting with the pajamas.
I believe that each of us is a healer. I believe that each of us can mend something. Some of us are called to heal the environment, others to heal families. Some of us are called to heal our systems of education, healthcare, and justice. Others are called to mend fences or the technology that connects us. A handful are called to mend the pajamas. Each of us can heal something, mend something, minor or monumental. And this world needs some mending. Perhaps you are familiar with the Jewish term tikkun olam. It points our attention to the moral imperative and human longing to heal the world. Rachel Naomi Raymond explains it this way. In the beginning of the creation, something happened, and the original light of the universe shattered into countless pieces. It lodged inside as shards of light in every aspect of the creation. The highest calling is to look for this light, to point to it when we see it, to gather it up, and in doing so, heal the world. She continues, "This is an important story for our time because it insists that within each and every one of us, frail and flawed as we may be, inadequate as we may feel, that we each have what is needed to help repair the part of the world that we can touch and see. Tikkun Olam manifests itself in the way we acknowledge the world and her people are broken and hurting. For while each of us carry a spark of the divine, some of us call it our inherent worth and dignity, it's also possible that we are broken and hurting and discouraged. This has been a long couple of years, and few of us have come out of it unscathed. Many of us are overwhelmed, wondering where we can begin to make a difference, and if our small efforts will really make a change. It reminds me of the old story of the woman who is walking along the beach, throwing stranded starfish back in the water, one after another, the whole length of the beach. And when asked why she is doing it, because she can't possibly throw them all back in, she replies, because it makes a difference to this one. And she throws it back in the water. In my networks, I am seeing an increased yearning to heal and to mend. So much as calling for our help that like a beach filled with starfish, it can be a lot. And the questions are always the same. Where do we start? What's most important? And where do we find the resources? And making those choices is hard because it all matters so very much. Early on in my ministry, I sat in on too many well-intentioned meetings that ran 3 hours or more. And afterwards, no decision had been made. No projects had been chosen because to choose a project or a handful of projects meant not choosing all the rest. So I had a shift in thinking. What if instead of trying to do them all, we chose one or two, maybe one local and one national or global? And what if we did them on a scale that could make an impact, but that doesn't exhaust our small group of people? Before this latest round of national and global crises, one very tiny but very mighty congregation I know well found a creative way to address poverty's impact in their community. They finally accepted that opening a daycare or a preschool was not possible. Their chosen neighborhood project is a semi-annual diaper drive in collaboration with the local diaper bank. Twice a year, they collect several thousand diapers, which then allow parents to go to school and their children to go to daycare. Many daycare facilities in Ohio require that parents supply their own diapers and wipes, and if they can't, their children can't attend daycare, and that the parents can't go to work or go to school. A diaper drive twice a year will not solve poverty in Canton, Ohio. They know that. However, having a fresh supply of diapers helps a significant number of parents do what they need to do to care for their families and to thrive, not just survive. A diaper drive is not going to heal the wounds left by generations of poverty, but perhaps it can help these families mend their current situation just enough. And that just enough can make all the difference. This small congregation found a way to embody Tikkun Olam. They are healing the part of the world that they can touch. The list of places and people that need our healing will always exceed our ability to meet them. That's the nature of the beast. but that mustn't deter us. We have a moral, human imperative to mend the world. This spring, rights that many of us took for granted were stripped, and others are potentially at risk. Perhaps like me, you have had those conversations with family and friends, colleagues and neighbors that have spun through shock and anger and despair and grief and fear and finally got to the place of asking those same questions that we find ourselves asking again and again. What's the most important thing to do right now? How can my small efforts make a difference? And where do we find the resources and funding and person power? I go back to Rachel Naomi Raymond. Each and every one of us, frail and flawed as we may be, inadequate as we feel, has exactly what we need to heal the part of the world that we can see and touch. I look around Traverse City and I see so much good work happening here. I remember from my time here a few years ago about the good work done with Safe Harbor. I remember the hundreds of meals prepared and how the diverse teams worked to create this safe environment for men and women who are experiencing homelessness. Does it solve the problem long term? No. But it is an invaluable place in this community that helps individuals and families get through some most difficult periods in their lives. I learned yesterday of some good work being done over at West High School, helping students reconnect after COVID. They have a variety of programs, from the building being open longer hours so students can access Wi-Fi for their homework, to a program for students who are homeless where they can come in before school and shower and change clothes discreetly with no one else noticing. And even feminine hygiene products being available without having to ask at the office. Each and every one is a small step helping students get back on their feet and thrive. There is so much good going on here. The list would take another hour. But the more I work with the good people in Traverse City and listen to what's going on, the more I respect the collective efforts toward the well-being of everyone. So the message is not take on everything, but to do the one or two things that call to you and you can do. And there's good news. The Unitarian Universalist congregation of Grand Traverse is part of a diverse network of congregations with a wealth of interfaith connections. Members and friends in that network are connected to a longer list of secular organizations on the state and national level. And this is a huge resource. It multiplies the number of people to work and the resources available. Once we accept that working alone is no longer an option, because once upon a time we thought we had to do it all ourselves. Once we accept that working alone is no longer an option, the hard part, of course, is deciding where to begin. Not every issue is for everyone. Some people like to work on policy and political action. Other people are drawn to community needs. Looking around, I can see the work of past and present visionaries whose ideas burn bright and clear this morning. These visionaries did not and do not fear obstacles and challenge. They recognize that what we call the fire of commitment is not a single bolt of lightning, a single moment in time, but it is a beacon to us to heal this world we share one corner at a time. Holding our strengths and frailties, may we each find the courage to do exactly what is needed in this transformative moment. We know in our hearts what we need to do, and we have the strength to do it. So may it be. Amen.
Will you please rise in body and spirit as you are able and join me in a wonderful rendition of the Fire of Commitment.
As we extinguish our chalice, let us carry its light forward to guide us in action and as a beacon of hope until we are together again.
We have one last joy to share. Barb Turmat's husband, John Matthews, starts his new position as a production manager at Zero Motorcycle tomorrow, after years of unemployment. Barb also reports that her mom is doing really well under John's care in California. Our closing words this morning were written by Mahatma Gandhi. A principle is a principle, and in no case can it be watered down because of our incapacity to live it in practice. We have to strive to achieve it, and the striving should be conscious, deliberate, and hard. Go in peace. Amen. Blessed be.